The moment Freya Campbell's fingers closed around the handle of the black suitcase, circling the baggage carousel, she had exactly 47 minutes to catch her connecting train to her grandmother's funeral, and absolutely no reason to believe her entire life was about to change. She yanked the luggage off the belt with more force than necessary, her eyes burning from the tears she had been holding back since she received the call 3 days ago. The airport was a blur of noise and movement, people rushing past her in both directions, but Freya felt like she was moving through water. Grandmother Ellen had been the one constant in her chaotic childhood, the woman who taught her to bake bread and believe in second chances, and now she was gone. The funeral was tomorrow morning in Cornwall, and Freya had promised her mother she would be there tonight to help with arrangements. She wheeled the suitcase toward the exit, her carry-on bag bouncing against her hip, mentally calculating whether she could grab coffee before the train departed. Probably not. The universe had not been kind to her this week. First the funeral, then her boss at the veterinary clinic had given her grief about taking time off, and the only flight she could afford had a 6-hour layover in London. She was exhausted, grieving and running on nothing but adrenaline and stale airplane peanuts. The cold January air hit her face as she pushed through the automatic doors, and she sucked in a breath, trying to ground herself. Just get to the train. Get to Cornwall. Get through tomorrow. One step at a time. She made it to the platform with 12 minutes to spare, collapsed into a seat by the window, and finally let herself breathe. The suitcase fit easily into the luggage rack, and she leaned her head against the window as the train pulled away from the station. The English countryside rolled past in shades of gray and brown, winter holding everything in its grip. Freya closed her eyes and let herself drift, thinking about her grandmother's garden, about summer visits filled with the smell of roses and fresh scones. She must have dozed off because the next thing she knew, the conductor was announcing her stop. Freya jerked awake, grabbed her bags, and stumbled off the train into the small station that served her grandmother's village. Her mother was waiting in the car park, looking older and more tired than Freya had ever seen her. They hugged without words, and Freya loaded her luggage into the trunk of her mother's aging Volvo. The drive to her grandmother's cottage took 15 minutes through narrow lanes bordered by stone walls. Neither of them spoke much. What was there to say? The cottage sat at the end of a winding drive, exactly as Freya remembered it, except now it felt empty in a way that made her chest ache. Inside, her aunt and uncle were already there, along with her 2 cousins. Everyone looked hollowed out by grief. They gathered in the kitchen because that was what their family did, congregating around the old wooden table where Grandmother Ellen had served countless meals. Freya's mother made tea, and they talked about funeral arrangements, about hymns and flowers and who would speak during the service. It was not until much later, after everyone had gone to bed in various rooms throughout the cottage, that Freya finally dragged her suitcase into the small guest room that had been hers during childhood visits. She was so tired her bones hurt, but she needed to unpack her funeral dress, make sure it was not too wrinkled. She laid the suitcase flat on the bed and unzipped it. Then she stared. Because inside the suitcase were not her belongings, but rather several expensive-looking men's suits, perfectly folded dress shirts, leather shoes that probably cost more than her monthly rent, and a laptop case that screamed corporate executive. "No," Freya whispered. "No, no, no." She rifled through the contents with growing panic. There was a leather toiletry bag filled with high-end grooming products, a tablet, file folders with what looked like important business documents, and absolutely nothing that belonged to her. Which meant someone had her suitcase. The suitcase that contained her black funeral dress, the only appropriate thing she had to wear tomorrow, plus all her toiletries, her favorite cardigan, and the letter she had written to read at her grandmother's service. Freya sank onto the bed, the panic rising in her throat. She wanted to scream. She wanted to cry. She wanted to rewind the last 12 hours and pay more attention at baggage claim, but it was too late for any of that. She forced herself to take a breath and think logically. There had to be a name tag on this suitcase. She checked the exterior, found a leather tag, and flipped it over. The information card inside was mostly blank, just a phone number written in bold, masculine handwriting. No name, no address, just the number. It was past 11 at night, but what choice did she have? Freya pulled out her phone and dialed before she could second-guess herself. The phone rang 3 times before a deep male voice answered, clipped and professional despite the late hour. "This is Marcus Xander." "Hi, you do not know me, but I think I accidentally took your suitcase at Heathrow this afternoon." The words tumbled out in a rush. "I am so sorry. I was not paying attention, and I just grabbed a black suitcase off the carousel, and I did not realize until just now that it was not mine, and you have my suitcase." The voice on the other end did not sound angry exactly, just very controlled. "Where are you, Cornwall?" "I am in Cornwall for a funeral tomorrow, and you have my suitcase, which has my funeral dress, and I do not know what I am going to wear," and her voice cracked, and she hated herself for it. This stranger did not need to hear her fall apart. There was a pause. When Marcus spoke again, his tone had softened slightly. "Cornwall. Which part?" She told him the name of the village, which was so small it barely appeared on most maps. There was another pause, longer this time, and she could hear the sound of typing in the background. "I am in London," Marcus said finally. "I can drive down tomorrow morning and we can exchange suitcases. Tomorrow morning. My grandmother's funeral is at 10. Freya pressed her palm against her forehead. "Could you possibly overnight my suitcase?" "I will pay for the shipping. I will pay for everything. I just really need my dress, and nothing is going to arrive by 10 in the morning," Marcus interrupted, his voice still calm but firm. "I will drive down. What time do you need your suitcase?" "I could not ask you to do that." "It is a 4-hour drive." "You are not asking, I am offering." "What time?" Freya's throat felt tight. This stranger, this man whose expensive suits she had accidentally stolen, was offering to drive through the night to bring her suitcase to a funeral. 8 would work. "That would give me time to get ready." "But are you sure?" "This is so far beyond. Text me the address," Marcus said. "I will be there at 8. He hung up before she could thank him properly. Freya sat staring at her phone, not quite believing what had just happened. She sent him the address, then tried to figure out what she was going to tell her mother in the morning about the strange man who would be showing up at the cottage before dawn. She barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she imagined new disasters. The suitcase being lost forever, missing the funeral, her mother's disappointment. At 6 in the morning, she gave up and went downstairs to make coffee. Her mother found her 20 minutes later, sitting at the kitchen table and staring into her mug. "You look terrible," her mother said, which was such a mom thing to say that Freya almost laughed. "I took the wrong suitcase from the airport," Freya admitted. "Someone is bringing mine here this morning, so I will have my dress for the funeral." Her mother's eyebrows rose. "Someone is driving all the way from London, apparently. That is very kind." "Yes." Freya did not know what else to say. It was beyond kind. It was borderline insane. "Who drove 4 hours to return a suitcase to a complete stranger. At exactly 8 in the morning, a sleek black Range Rover pulled up in front of the cottage." Freya had been watching through the window for the past 30 minutes, and she hurried outside before Marcus could knock and wake up the rest of the house. The man who stepped out of the car was not what she expected. She had pictured someone older based on the voice and the expensive suits, but Marcus Xander looked like he was in his early 30s, tall and broad-shouldered with dark hair and sharp features that would have been almost severe if not for the slight softness around his eyes that suggested he had not slept much either. He wore jeans and a dark sweater, and he was pulling her familiar battered suitcase from the back of his vehicle. "Freya?" he asked, and she nodded, suddenly very aware that she was wearing her old university sweatshirt and her hair was in a messy bun. "Thank you," she said, the words feeling completely inadequate. "I cannot believe you drove all this way. I am so sorry about the mix-up." Marcus wheeled her suitcase over and she handed him his in exchange. Up close, she could see the fatigue in his face, the slight stubble on his jaw. "Do not apologize. These things happen. Did you drive through the night? I left at 4 this morning." He glanced at the cottage, then back at her. "Your grandmother's funeral is at 10? "Yes." Something flickered in his expression, something that looked almost like understanding. "My grandfather died last year. I know how hard it is. I am sorry for your loss." The kindness in his voice made Freya's eyes sting with fresh tears. She blinked them back quickly. "Thank you, and thank you for this. You have literally saved me today." Marcus nodded, then hesitated, his hand still on the handle of his suitcase. "I should let you get ready, but if you need anything else, you have my number." "I do not think I can possibly need anything else after you drove 4 hours to rescue me from my own stupidity," Freya said, trying to smile. "I owe you so much. Can I at least offer you breakfast, coffee? My mother makes amazing scones." "I should get back to London," Marcus said, but his eyes drifted to the cottage again, and Freya could see the exhaustion in the set of his shoulders. "You drove 4 hours. At least let me feed you before you drive 4 hours back, please. I will feel terrible if you leave without eating." Marcus looked at her for a long moment, and Freya got the strange impression that he was making some kind of calculation in his head, weighing options she could not see. Finally, he nodded. Coffee would be good. She led him inside, acutely aware of the cottage shabbiness compared to the luxury that was probably his normal life. The kitchen was warm and cluttered, lived in and loved. Her mother was pulling a tray of scones from the oven, and she looked up in surprise when Freya entered with Marcus behind her. "Mum, this is Marcus Xander. Marcus, my mother, Patricia Campbell." Patricia wiped her hands on a towel and smiled warmly, the way she always did with guests even when her heart was breaking. "Thank you so much for bringing Freya's suitcase. That was incredibly kind. Please, sit down. I have fresh scones and coffee." Marcus sat at the old kitchen table, looking slightly out of place among the worn wooden chairs and mismatched mugs, but he accepted the coffee and scone with genuine appreciation. Freya's mother chatted with him easily, asking about his drive and where he was from, and Marcus answered politely while Freya stood by the counter, trying to figure out why her heart was beating faster than normal. He was handsome, certainly, but it was more than that. There was something solid about him, something grounded despite the expensive car and the business suits in his suitcase. He spoke to her mother with real respect, not the dismissive politeness some people used with older women. And he had driven through the night to help a stranger, which suggested a kind of decency that Freya did not encounter often in her daily life. Her aunt wandered into the kitchen, followed by her cousins, and suddenly the room was full of people. Introductions were made, more coffee was poured, and Marcus found himself absorbed into the Campbell family chaos with surprising ease. He answered questions about London and listened to Freya's younger cousin talk about her university courses, and somehow it felt almost natural to have him there, even though he was a complete stranger who had entered their lives less than an hour ago. Finally, Freya glanced at the clock and realized she needed to get ready. "I should go change," she said reluctantly. "The service is in 90 minutes. Marcus stood immediately. "I should go anyway. You have family things to do." "Will you be all right to drive back?" Patricia asked, concerned. "You must be exhausted." "I will be fine," Marcus assured her. "Thank you for breakfast." Freya walked him back outside, carrying his suitcase. The morning was gray and cold, typical for January in Cornwall, and their breath made clouds in the air. Marcus loaded his suitcase into the Range Rover, then turned to face her. "Thank you again," Freya said. "I know I keep saying it, but I do not know how else to express how much this meant to me." "You do not need to thank me again," Marcus said, but he was smiling slightly, the first real smile she had seen from him. It transformed his face, made him look younger and more approachable. "I hope the funeral goes as well as these things can go. I hope your drive back is smooth." They stood there for another moment, neither quite moving. Freya had the strangest sense that something significant was happening, some connection forming that she did not entirely understand. Marcus seemed to feel it too because he looked at her with an expression that was almost puzzled, as if he was trying to figure out something complicated. "Can I call you?" he asked suddenly. "After today, after things settle down, I would like to make sure you are all right." Freya's heart did a strange little flip. "You do not need to check on me. I am fine." "I know I do not need to. I want to." There was no good reason for Freya to say yes. This man was clearly out of her league in every possible way, from his expensive car to his tailored suits to the confidence he wore like a second skin. He probably had a girlfriend, maybe a fiancée. He was probably just being polite. But there was something in his eyes, something genuine and interested that made her nod before she could overthink it. "Okay," she said. "Yes, call me." Marcus smiled again, and Freya felt that same flutter in her chest. "Take care of yourself, Freya Campbell. Drive safe, Marcus Xander." She watched him drive away, standing in the cold morning air, until the Range Rover disappeared around the bend in the lane. Then she went inside to get ready to say goodbye to her grandmother, her mind full of thoughts that had nothing to do with funeral arrangements and everything to do with dark eyes and unexpected kindness. The funeral was beautiful and heartbreaking in equal measure. The small church was packed with villagers who had known Grandmother Ellen for decades, and the service was full of hymns she had loved and stories that made people laugh through their tears. Freya managed to read her letter without completely breaking down, though her voice shook through most of it. Her mother held her hand during the burial, and they stood together in the churchyard afterward, accepting condolences from neighbors and old friends. It was late afternoon by the time they returned to the cottage. Freya was emotionally wrung out, exhausted in a way that went beyond physical tiredness. She helped her mother prepare sandwiches for the people who came back to the house, made tea, listened to stories about her grandmother, and felt the weight of loss settle into her bones. Her phone buzzed in her pocket around 6 in the evening. She slipped into the hallway to check it, and her heart jumped when she saw the message from an unknown number that could only be Marcus. "I hope today was bearable, thinking of you." It was simple and straightforward, but it made Freya's eyes well up with tears for reasons she could not entirely explain. She typed back quickly. "Thank you. It was hard but good. Did you make it back to London safely?" His response came within seconds. "Yes, just got home." "You must be exhausted." "I am, but I wanted to check on you first." Freya leaned against the wall, staring at her phone screen. This did not feel like polite concern from a stranger. This felt like something more, something that made her pulse quicken and her stomach flutter with a mix of nervousness and anticipation. Over the next 3 days, they texted constantly. It started with simple check-ins, Marcus asking how she was holding up, Freya thanking him again for his kindness. But it quickly evolved into real conversations. He told her about his work, how he was the CEO of a luxury hotel chain that his grandfather had founded. She told him about her job at the veterinary clinic, about the animals she treated, and the complicated relationship she had with her boss. He asked about her grandmother, and she found herself telling him stories she had not shared with anyone else, about summer visits and baking lessons, and the quiet wisdom that grandmother Ellen had possessed. Freya learned that Marcus was 33, that he had taken over the family business when his grandfather died, and that the pressure of running a multi-million-pound company sometimes felt overwhelming. He asked about her life in Bristol, about her tiny flat and her morning runs along the river, and he seemed genuinely interested in the details of her ordinary existence. On the 4th day, he called instead of texting. Freya was in the cottage garden, taking a break from sorting through her grandmother's belongings, and she answered immediately. "Hi," she said, and her voice sounded breathless even to her own ears. "Hi," Marcus replied. "Is this a good time? Perfect time." I needed a break from packing up the house. They talked for an hour about nothing and everything. Marcus told her about a difficult negotiation he was handling for a new hotel in Edinburgh. Freya told him about the golden retriever puppy that had come into the clinic that morning with a stomach full of rocks. He laughed at that, a real laugh that was warm and genuine, and Freya found herself smiling into the phone like a teenager. "When are you going back to Bristol?" Marcus asked eventually. "Tomorrow afternoon. I need to get back to work." There was a pause. Then Marcus said carefully, "Bristol is not that far from London. Would you want to have dinner with me this weekend?" Freya's heart was racing. "Are you asking me on a date?" "Yes." "I am definitely asking you on a date. I live 3 hours from London. I know. I am happy to come to you, or you could come here. Either way." Freya thought about all the reasons she should say no. She barely knew this man. He was wealthy and successful, while she was struggling to pay her student loans and living in a flat she shared with 2 roommates. He probably dated models and executives, not veterinary technicians who wore scrubs to work and had dog hair on everything they owned. But then she thought about his kindness at the airport, about the way he talked to her mother, about the texts that made her smile even on the hardest days. "Okay," she said. "Yes, I would like that." "Saturday," Marcus suggested. "I can come to Bristol. You can show me your city." "You want to see Bristol?" "I want to see you. Bristol is just a bonus." Freya was definitely blushing now, alone in her grandmother's garden with her face heating up like she was 15 years old. "Saturday works. Should I plan anything specific?" "Surprise me," Marcus said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. "I trust your judgment." They made arrangements, and after they hung up, Freya sat on the garden bench for a long time, looking at the roses that were dormant for winter and trying to process what was happening. She had just agreed to go on a date with a CEO who drove a Range Rover and wore suits that cost more than her monthly salary. It was crazy. It was improbable. It was possibly the most exciting thing that had happened to her in years. She went inside to find her mother sorting through photo albums in the sitting room. Patricia looked up when Freya entered, and something in Freya's expression must have given her away because her mother smiled knowingly. "That man who brought your suitcase," Patricia said. "You like him." It was not a question, but Freya answered anyway. "Yes, is that crazy?" "Why would it be crazy?" "Because I do not know anything about him. Because he is way out of my league. Because he drove 4 hours to return a suitcase, which is either incredibly kind or slightly unhinged." Patricia laughed softly. "Or both. Your grandmother always said the best things in life happen when you least expect them. She would tell you to give him a chance. He wants to take me to dinner on Saturday. Then I hope you have a wonderful time. Patricia turned back to the photo album, but she was still smiling. Your grandmother would be pleased. She always worried you worked too hard and did not have enough fun. Freya thought about that on the train ride back to Bristol the next day. It was true that she had been focused on work for the past few years, building her career and trying to save money, and not really making time for relationships. The few dates she had been on had been disappointing at best, awkward disasters at worst. She had started to think maybe she was just not good at romance, that maybe she was too practical or too busy or too something. But with Marcus, even just texting, it felt different. Easy. Natural. Like they had known each other longer than a few days. Saturday arrived faster than Freya expected. She changed outfits 4 times before settling on jeans, ankle boots, and a soft green sweater that one of her roommates insisted brought out her eyes. Marcus texted when he was 20 minutes away, and Freya found herself pacing her flat nervously while her roommates, Jess and Amy, watched with barely concealed amusement. "You are acting like you have never been on a date before," Jess said, sprawled across the sofa with her laptop. "I have not been on a date with a CEO before," Freya shot back. "He is just a person," Amy pointed out reasonably. "A person who apparently thinks you are worth a 3-hour drive." That was exactly what made Freya nervous. What if she was disappointing in person? What if the connection they had over text did not translate to real life? What if he took one look at her tiny flat with its thrift store furniture and realized they were from completely different worlds? Her phone buzzed. "I am here." Freya took a deep breath, grabbed her jacket and headed downstairs. Marcus was leaning against his Range Rover and he straightened when he saw her, his face breaking into a smile that made her stomach do backflips. "Hi," she said. "Hi." He looked genuinely happy to see her, and that eased some of Freya's nervousness. "You look beautiful. You drove 3 hours." "I did. Completely worth it." He opened the passenger door for her. "Where are we going?" "I thought we could walk around the harbor, get coffee, see where the day takes us. Unless you had something specific in mind." "That sounds perfect." They drove into the city center, and Freya directed him to a car park near the waterfront. It was a bright, cold afternoon, the kind of January day that was crisp and clear, and the harbor was busy with weekend crowds. They bought coffee from a small cafe and walked along the waterfront, talking easily about everything and nothing. Freya showed him her favorite spots, the little bookshop she visited every weekend, the bridge where she liked to watch the boats, the park where she ran in the mornings. Marcus listened and asked questions and seemed genuinely interested in her life, which was both flattering and slightly surreal. She kept expecting him to check his phone or seem distracted, but he was completely present, focused entirely on her. They had lunch at a small Italian restaurant tucked down a side street, and over pasta and wine, the conversation turned more personal. Marcus told her about his childhood, about growing up in his grandfather's shadow, and feeling the pressure to live up to the family legacy. He talked about his parents, who had died in a car accident when he was in university, and how that loss had shaped him in ways he was still figuring out. "My grandfather stepped in after they died," Marcus said quietly. "He practically raised me through my 20s. When he died last year, it felt like losing my parents all over again, but worse, because I was supposed to be ready. I was supposed to be strong enough to handle it and take over the company without falling apart." Freya reached across the table and took his hand without thinking. "Grief does not care about what you are supposed to be ready for. You are allowed to fall apart." Marcus looked at their joined hands, then up at her face. "You get it. Most people do not." I do get it. Losing my grandmother feels like losing a piece of my foundation. She was the person who made me feel safe no matter what else was happening. They sat there for a moment, hands linked across the table, and Freya felt that connection again, stronger now. This was not just physical attraction or the excitement of a new relationship. This was something deeper, something built on understanding and shared experience. After lunch, they walked through the city for hours, losing track of time. Marcus told her about the hotels he managed, about his vision for expanding the brand while maintaining the personal touch his grandfather had valued. Freya told him about her dream of opening her own veterinary practice someday, about how she was saving money slowly but surely. He did not laugh at her dreams or suggest they were small. He listened like they mattered. As the afternoon turned to evening, they found themselves back at the harbor, watching the sun set over the water. It painted the sky in shades of pink and gold, and Freya shivered slightly in the cold air. Marcus immediately shrugged out of his jacket and draped it over her shoulders. "I should probably let you drive home before it gets too late," Freya said, even though the last thing she wanted was for the day to end. "Or I could stay," Marcus said. "Get a hotel room, take you to dinner, spend tomorrow with you before I drive back." Freya's heart was racing again. "You have work Monday, I do, but right now I would rather be here with you." "This is crazy," Freya said, but she was smiling. "We barely know each other." "Then let's fix that." Marcus turned to face her fully, his expression serious. "I like you, Freya. I have not stopped thinking about you since the airport. I know this is fast, and I know we are from different worlds, but I would like to see where this goes. If you want that too." Freya thought about all the practical reasons to slow down, to be cautious, to protect her heart. But standing there in the fading light with Marcus looking at her like she was the only person who mattered, none of those reasons seemed important. "I want that too," she said. Marcus smiled, that full, genuine smile that transformed his face, and then he kissed her. It was soft and careful, a question as much as a statement, and Freya kissed him back with her heart pounding and her head spinning. When they pulled apart, she was breathless. "So dinner?" Marcus asked, his voice slightly rough. "Dinner," Freya agreed. He took her to a restaurant with views over the city. The kind of place Freya had walked past 100 times, but never been inside, because it was far too expensive. The food was incredible, but Freya barely tasted it because she was too busy talking to Marcus, learning more about him, falling further into this impossible thing that was happening between them. Over dessert, Marcus told her about his company in more detail. Xander Hotels owned 15 luxury properties across the UK and Europe, with plans to expand further. It was a multi-million-pound business, and Marcus had grown it significantly since taking over from his grandfather. He talked about the pressure and the responsibility, but also the satisfaction of building something meaningful. "You ever get time off?" Freya asked, trying to imagine what his daily life must be like. "Not as much as I should," Marcus admitted. "I have been using work to avoid dealing with my grief, if I am being honest. It is easier to focus on hotel occupancy rates and staff issues than to sit with how much I miss my grandfather." "That makes sense. But it is not sustainable, I know, which is part of why I am here. You make me want to slow down, pay attention to things outside of work." "We have been on one date," Freya pointed out, but she was pleased. "Best date I have had in years," Marcus said firmly, "possibly ever." They stayed at the restaurant until it closed, then walked slowly back toward where Marcus had parked. He had booked a room at a hotel near the harbor, and they stood outside the entrance, neither quite ready to say good night. "Tomorrow?" Marcus asked. "Can I see you again tomorrow?" "Yes." "Definitely yes." He kissed her again, longer this time, his hands gentle on her face. When Freya finally pulled away and headed home, she felt like she was floating. Sunday was even better than Saturday. Marcus picked her up in the morning and they drove out to the countryside, finding a small village with a Sunday market and a pub that served roast dinners. They walked through bare winter fields, talking and laughing, and Freya could not remember the last time she had felt this happy, this light. In the afternoon, they returned to Bristol, and Freya showed Marcus the veterinary clinic where she worked. It was closed on Sundays, but she had a key, and she wanted him to see this part of her life. They walked through the examination rooms and the small surgery, and Freya told him about the animals she treated, the cases that kept her up at night, the moments of pure joy when she helped save a life. Marcus listened with genuine interest, asking thoughtful questions, and when she finished showing him around, he pulled her close and said, "You are incredible." "Do you know that?" Freya buried her face against his chest, overwhelmed by how much she was feeling after just 2 days. "You barely know me. I know enough. I know you are kind and smart and passionate about what you do. I know you drove yourself crazy worrying about your funeral dress because you wanted to honor your grandmother properly. I know you care deeply about people and animals, and you make me want to be better." She looked up at him, and the expression on his face took her breath away. "Marcus, too much?" he asked, slightly sheepish. "I've been told I can be intense. No, not too much, just unexpected." They kissed in the middle of the veterinary clinic, surrounded by the smell of antiseptic and dog shampoo, and it was perfect. Marcus left for London late Sunday evening, and Freya felt the loss immediately. They texted constantly over the next week, good morning messages and late-night conversations, photos and jokes, and the kind of constant communication that made Freya feel connected to him even across the distance. He came back to Bristol the following weekend, and the weekend after that. By the third visit, Freya's roommates were completely charmed by him, especially after he brought expensive wine and asked them about their lives with genuine interest. Marcus fit into her world surprisingly easily, eating takeout on the sofa and laughing at terrible movies and helping her cook dinner in the tiny kitchen. But Freya had not seen his world yet. That changed when Marcus invited her to London for a long weekend in late February. "I want to show you where I live," he said over the phone, "and I have a gala for the business on Saturday night. I would love it if you came with me." "A gala?" Freya's voice squeaked slightly. "Marcus, I do not have anything to wear to a gala. We will figure that out. Please, I want you there." Freya agreed, though she was terrified. A gala meant black tie formal, meant rubbing shoulders with wealthy business people, meant being completely out of her depth. But Marcus wanted her there, and she wanted to be with him, so she would figure it out. She took the train to London on Friday afternoon, and Marcus met her at Paddington Station, pulling her into a hug that felt like coming home. His flat was in Mayfair, which should not have surprised her, but somehow did. It was a penthouse apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Hyde Park, decorated with modern furniture and original art that probably cost more than Freya's entire education. "This is insane," Freya said, standing in the middle of the living room and turning in a slow circle. "Your view is insane. Your whole life is insane." Marcus laughed, coming up behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. "It is just a flat." "It is not just a flat. It is like something from a magazine." "Does it bother you, the money thing?" Freya turned in his arms to face him. "It does not bother me. It is just different from anything I have known. I do not want you to think I am with you because of this." She gestured at the expensive surroundings. "I do not think that," Marcus said firmly. "You have never once asked me for anything. You tried to pay for coffee on our first date. Trust me. I know you are not here for the money." They spent Friday evening exploring the neighborhood, eating at a small Thai restaurant that Marcus swore had the best food in London despite its unassuming exterior. Saturday morning, he took her to his office, showing her the headquarters of Xander Hotels, introducing her to his assistant and a few key executives. Everyone was professional and polite, but Freya could feel them assessing her, trying to figure out who she was and why their CEO had brought her to the office. In the afternoon, Marcus took her shopping for the gala. Freya protested, saying she could find something affordable, but Marcus insisted. "This is a work event," he said. "Let me buy you a dress, please." They went to a boutique in Knightsbridge where the sales assistants treated them like royalty. Freya tried on a dozen dresses before finding one that made her feel both beautiful and comfortable. A deep blue gown that skimmed her figure and made her eyes look almost violet. It cost more than she made in a month, and she felt guilty, even as Marcus handed over his credit card without blinking. "You look stunning," he said when she modeled it for him, and the way he looked at her made the guilt fade slightly. The gala was held at one of Marcus's hotels, a historic building in Bloomsbury that had been recently renovated to combine old-world elegance with modern luxury. Freya felt out of place immediately, surrounded by women in designer gowns and men in expensive tuxedos, everyone looking like they belonged in this world of wealth and privilege. But Marcus never left her side. He introduced her to business partners and investors, his hand steady on her back, making it clear without words that she was important to him. Freya smiled and made small talk and tried not to feel intimidated by people who probably had vacation homes in the south of France. During dinner, she sat next to a woman named Charlotte, who ran a chain of boutique fitness studios and who turned out to be funny and down to earth, despite her enormous diamond earrings. They talked about their grandmothers, about growing businesses, and by the time dessert arrived, Freya was actually enjoying herself. Marcus gave a speech after dinner, talking about his grandfather's vision for the company and his plans for the future. He was articulate and confident, every inch the successful CEO, and Freya felt a surge of pride watching him. This was his world, this life of luxury hotels and black tie galas, but he had still driven 4 hours to return her suitcase, still wanted to spend his weekends in Bristol eating takeout on her worn sofa. After the speeches, there was dancing. Marcus pulled her onto the floor, and despite Freya's protests that she was not a good dancer, they moved together easily. He held her close, and she rested her head against his shoulder, feeling like they were in their own private bubble despite being surrounded by hundreds of people. "Thank you for being here," Marcus murmured against her hair. "I know this is not your scene." "I am here because I wanted to be with you," Freya said honestly. "The fancy gala is just a bonus." He laughed softly and kissed her forehead, and Freya felt something shift inside her. She was falling in love with him. Maybe she had been since the morning he showed up at her grandmother's cottage, looking exhausted but determined to help a stranger. Maybe she had been since their first real conversation, when he told her about his grandfather, and she saw the grief he carried. Whenever it had started, it was undeniable now, this feeling that was bigger and deeper than anything she had experienced before. They left the gala around midnight and returned to Marcus's flat. He poured them both wine, and they stood on the balcony looking out over the city lights, wrapped in a blanket together against the cold. "Can I tell you something?" Marcus said after a long, comfortable silence. "Anything. I have been thinking about this a lot, about us. I know we have only been seeing each other for about 6 weeks, which is not very long, but I cannot imagine my life without you in it anymore. You make everything better. You make me want to slow down and pay attention to the things that actually matter. I am falling in love with you, Freya." "Actually, I think I already have." Freya's heart was racing, but in the best way. I am falling in love with you too. I have been trying not to rush it or make it a big deal in my head because 6 weeks is ridiculous, but I cannot help it. You are the best thing that has happened to me in a very long time. Marcus set down his wine glass and cupped her face in his hands, looking at her with an intensity that made her shiver. Stay here tonight. Stay the whole weekend. Stay forever if you want. Forever is a long time, Freya said, but she was smiling. I know, but I mean it. I want you in my life, Freya, not just for weekends and phone calls. I want the real thing. The real thing, Freya repeated. What does that look like? I do not know exactly. We will figure it out together. Maybe you spend more time here. Maybe I spend more time in Bristol. Maybe eventually we talk about moving in together, about building a life that works for both of us. It was fast, maybe too fast, but Freya could not bring herself to care. I want that too, all of it. They kissed, and it felt like a promise, like sealing something important. Later, lying in Marcus's bed with his arms around her and the city lights filtering through the windows, Freya thought about how strange life was, how one small mistake at an airport had led to this, to falling in love with a man she never would have met otherwise. Over the next few months, they figured out how to make it work. Freya started spending long weekends in London, and Marcus came to Bristol whenever he could. They talked about the future in concrete terms, about what it would mean for Freya to move to London eventually, about how that fit with her career goals. In April, Marcus helped her apply for positions at veterinary clinics in London. He did not pressure her or try to solve all her problems with money, but he supported her in practical ways, helping her polish her resume and practice for interviews. When she got offered a job at a respected clinic in Clapham, she cried happy tears on the phone with him, and he took the train to Bristol that same evening to celebrate. She moved to London in May. Marcus wanted her to move straight into his flat, but Freya insisted on getting her own place first, wanting to maintain some independence even as their relationship deepened. She found a small flat in Clapham, not far from her new job, and Marcus helped her move, carrying boxes up 3 flights of stairs without complaint. But she spent most nights at his place anyway. They fell into an easy routine, cooking dinner together, watching movies on the sofa, talking about their days. Marcus's work was demanding, but he made time for her in ways that mattered. He came home for dinner instead of working until midnight. He took Saturdays off when he could. He showed up when he said he would and communicated when things came up. Freya met his extended family over the summer at a big gathering in the Cotswolds. His cousins and aunts and uncles were welcoming and warm, and his grandmother, his grandfather's widow, pulled Freya aside before dessert and said, "He is happier than I have seen him since my husband died. Thank you for that." "I think we make each other happy," Freya said, and it was true. Marcus brought stability and confidence into her life, a sense that she could dream bigger than she had allowed herself before. And she brought lightness and perspective into his, reminding him that life was more than quarterly reports and occupancy rates. By September, they were talking seriously about moving in together. Freya's lease was up in October, and the question was whether she would renew or officially move into Marcus's flat. They had a long conversation about it one evening, sitting on his balcony with wine and take-out Thai food. "I do not want you to feel like you are giving up your independence," Marcus said carefully. "If you want to keep your own place, I understand that." "I do not want my own place," Freya said. "I want to be here with you. But I need to know this is really what you want too, not just the logical next step or something you think you should do." "Freya." Marcus set down his wine and took her hands. "I have known since that first weekend in Bristol that I wanted to build a life with you. Moving in together is not some obligation. It is what I want more than anything. I want to wake up with you every morning. I want to come home to you every night. I want all of it." So she moved in. It was surprisingly easy, blending her thrift store furniture with his expensive pieces, making room for her veterinary textbooks on his shelves, hanging her photos on his walls until it became their space, not just his. In November, nearly a year after they met, Marcus took her back to Cornwall. They stayed at a beautiful hotel overlooking the sea, but they spent most of the weekend at her grandmother's cottage, which her mother had decided to keep as a family retreat. Freya showed Marcus the garden where her grandmother had taught her about roses, the kitchen where they had baked bread together, all the places that held memories. On their last evening, they walked down to the beach as the sun was setting. The winter light was clear and cold, painting everything in shades of gold and amber. Marcus stopped at the edge of the water, and when Freya turned to ask him what he was doing, she found him on one knee in the sand. "I had this whole speech planned," Marcus said, looking up at her with eyes that reflected the sunset. "Something about suitcases and fate and how I knew the moment I saw you in your grandmother's garden that my life had changed. But all of that feels inadequate now. The truth is simple. I love you. I love everything about you, from your terrible jokes to your compassion for every living creature to the way you make me want to be better. I want to spend the rest of my life with you, Freya Campbell. Will you marry me?" Freya was crying and laughing at the same time, nodding before she could even get words out. "Yes, yes, of course, yes." The ring was perfect, a sapphire surrounded by diamonds that reminded her of the dress she had worn to the gala. Marcus stood and pulled her into a kiss, and Freya wrapped her arms around him, feeling like her heart might burst from happiness. They were married the following June in a small ceremony in the village church where her grandmother's funeral had been held. It felt right to start their marriage in a place that held so much history and love. Freya's mother cried through the entire ceremony, and Marcus's grandmother gave a toast at the reception about how love finds us when we least expect it. Their honeymoon was spent traveling to all of Marcus's hotels, which sounds luxurious, but was actually a working trip that Freya had insisted on joining. She wanted to understand his world completely, to see what he had built and why it mattered to him. They visited properties in Edinburgh and Paris and Barcelona, and at each one, Marcus introduced her to the staff and showed her his vision for the future. But the best part was the in-between moments, the train rides and road trips, the lazy mornings in beautiful hotel rooms, the dinners where they talked about their dreams. Marcus told her he wanted to start a foundation in his grandfather's name, something focused on hospitality education for young people from disadvantaged backgrounds. Freya told him she was thinking about going back to school part-time to become a full veterinarian, not just a technician. "Do it," Marcus said immediately. "I will support you however you need. It is expensive. It would take years. So, you are brilliant and you would be an incredible veterinarian. If this is what you want, we will make it work." Freya applied to programs that fall and was accepted to start the following year. Marcus was absurdly proud of her, telling anyone who would listen that his wife was going to be a doctor. Balancing veterinary school with marriage and her part-time job at the clinic was challenging, but Marcus was there through all of it, quizzing her for exams and celebrating her successes, and holding her when the stress felt overwhelming. 3 years later, Freya graduated and immediately joined a practice in North London that specialized in exotic animals. She loved the work, loved the challenge of treating creatures from parrots to pythons, and she came home every day with stories that made Marcus laugh. On their 4th wedding anniversary, Marcus surprised her with a trip back to Cornwall. They stayed at the cottage, which the family still maintained, and spent the weekend walking the beaches and visiting all the places that mattered to Freya. On their last evening, as they sat in the garden watching the sunset, Marcus said, "I have been thinking about something." "That sounds ominous," Freya teased. "Not ominous, just big." He reached for her hand. "What would you think about having a baby?" Freya's heart skipped. They had talked about children in abstract terms, someday in the future, but this felt real and immediate. "You want to be a father." "I want to be a father to your children. I want to build a family with you, but only if you want that too." Freya thought about it for approximately 3 seconds before nodding. "Yes, I want that. I want all of it with you." They started trying that summer, and by Christmas, Freya was pregnant. Morning sickness hit her hard through the first trimester, and Marcus became an expert at making ginger tea and keeping crackers by the bed. He went to every doctor's appointment, his hand tight around hers when they heard the heartbeat for the first time. Their daughter was born the following August, a perfect, healthy baby girl with dark hair and her father's eyes. They named her Ellen, after Freya's grandmother, and Patricia, after Freya's mother. Marcus held his daughter with a tenderness that made Freya cry, and she knew without question that she had chosen the right person to build a life with. Ellen was 2 when they found out Freya was pregnant again, this time with twins. Marcus was thrilled and terrified in equal measure, and Freya spent her entire pregnancy laughing at his attempts to prepare for 2 babies at once. He read every book, took every class, baby-proofed the flat twice over. The twins, a boy and a girl they named James and Grace, arrived healthy and demanding, and suddenly their quiet life became controlled chaos. Marcus scaled back his work hours even more, determined not to miss these early years. He learned to change diapers with one hand while holding a bottle with the other, mastered the art of getting 3 children dressed and out the door, and somehow made Freya fall even more in love with him by being the kind of father who showed up fully and completely. On their 10th wedding anniversary, they went back to Heathrow Airport, which Marcus insisted on even though Freya thought it was silly. "This is where it all started," Marcus said, standing at the baggage claim in Terminal 5, their 3 children in tow. Ellen was 8 now, old enough to understand the story of how her parents met. The twins were 6 and bouncing with energy. "Mummy took the wrong suitcase," Ellen said importantly, reciting the story she had heard 100 times. "And Daddy drove all the way to find her." "He did," Freya confirmed, looking at Marcus with all the love she felt. "He drove through the night because I was too distracted to pay attention." "Best mistake you ever made," Marcus said, pulling her close while their children made exaggerated gagging noises at their parents' affection. "Best mistake we both made," Freya corrected, "because you could have just shipped the suitcase." "I could have. But then I would have missed everything that came after." Marcus kissed her softly, ignoring their children's protests. "Marrying you, building this life, these 3 ridiculous humans we created. I would not change a single moment." Later, after they had taken the children to dinner and returned home to their now much larger house in Hampstead, Freya and Marcus stood in their garden, watching the stars come out. The children were finally asleep after extensive bedtime negotiations, and the house was quiet. "You ever think about what would have happened if you had not driven down that morning?" Freya asked, leaning against Marcus's solid warmth. "No," Marcus said simply. "Because it was always going to be you. Maybe not that exact way, but somehow, somewhere, we were always going to find each other. You cannot possibly know that. I know that I saw you standing in your grandmother's garden, looking exhausted and sad and so beautiful it hurt, and I knew my life had just changed. I know that every decision I have made since that morning has been about building a life with you." And I know that 10 years later, I love you more than I did on our wedding day, more than I did when Ellen was born, more than yesterday. It just keeps growing. Freya turned in his arms and kissed him, pouring everything she felt into it. I love you too. Thank you for tracking me down and never leaving. Thank you for taking my suitcase. They laughed together, and Freya thought about the chain of small moments that had led to this life. Her grandmother's death, a rushed trip, an inattentive moment at baggage claim, a phone number on a luggage tag. Any one of those things could have gone differently, and they never would have met. But they had happened exactly as they were meant to, and she had ended up with this man, this life, this family. She did not believe in fate exactly, but she believed in this, in the love they had built from one accidental meeting, in the life they were still creating together. 10 years later, 3 children, countless challenges and triumphs, and Marcus Xander was still the man who would drive through the night to help her, who showed up when he said he would, who loved her exactly as she was. And Freya Campbell, now Freya Xander, was still the woman who had accidentally taken his suitcase and ended up with his heart, who had built a life far beyond anything she had imagined standing in her grandmother's garden on that cold January morning. Some mistakes, it turned out, were the best things that ever happened, and some strangers were meant to become your forever.